Welcome to PowerUp podcast, the podcast that seeks to empower and dismantle, giving us the power and confidence to question, deconstruct, rebuild, and expand in life. I'm your host, AmaRouge, voiceover and multidisciplinary artist, well-being advocate, food and book geek with over 14 years of movement-centered experience.
I am your host, Mesma, artist, choreographer, yogi and coach with a passion for alchemy, creativity, transformation and workplace wellness.
We recognise that we can't dismantle and empower or be empowered without first learning ourselves, diving deeper to unlearn the harmful, restrictive and unprogressive. It's an ongoing practice and journey for us all, which is why we created this podcast.
Our show features guests doing the work to enlighten, deconstruct and power up in their own magical ways.
We're going to be having conversations around the power of healing, transformation, well-being and creativity, and how they feed our personal and collective evolution, how they help us power up. It's no secret that a lot of us are burnt out. Data shows that 75% of people have felt burnt out at work and 40% have felt so during the pandemic in particular. It's not just in the workplace that we can experience burnout. It can hit us where we don't expect it to, in social settings, when job hunting, and even while dating. In the modern world, it seems like it's something we can't escape. That is a quote from an article written by Amy Beecham in a recent Stylist article, where she goes on to talk about a book that's been released by author and coach Selena Barker all around burnout. And I just found it really interesting, one, all the places that burnout can present, because often we associate it with the workplace, or traditionally we associate it with the workplace only. And two, how high the percentage is now of people that have felt burnout. And then with the pandemic as well, that number particularly being quite large. It's a real thing, isn't it, now in society?
I think it's 70%. Did you say 70%, Emma?
75% of people.
75%, yeah. So it's exactly the same statistic that I was going to read. Well, mine was 76. Yeah, it's so high. It's affecting everyone effectively, isn't it?
Yeah.
You will know someone with burnout, and probably you will have experienced it at some point in your life.
Or it's waiting. It's waiting for you, lurking around the corner. Hopefully not.
And for sure, I've experienced it, and I know you have too, Emma.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, there've been multiple stages in my life, and actually it is that thing of like almost like the breakdowns to break through, that every single time I've admitted that that's what's happening, I've made changes that have helped me to kind of live my life better. But they're kind of quite marked moments in my life of burnout. And I think the most recent one was kind of in August of 2020, when I completed on a few projects that I was really grateful to have had the opportunity to do in terms of lockdown and COVID and so on. I was super grateful. But what I realized was that I'd really gone into this kind of helper mode, like survival, like my survival action. We all have our different ways that we respond and react, don't we? Was this helper mode, which meant that I'd forgotten that I might need a rest. Or, it's literally like I'd switched off Ella, and I just was like, how can I help? I need to, and it was almost in some ways it was connected to knowing that I was going to be okay and I had work. So it was like, well, I'm going to be okay, so I need to help everyone.
Yeah.
And eventually, in August, I was like, hang on a minute, I need to just stop, and I need to actually look after me. And that it's caused all of us a huge trauma, a huge change, and that I hadn't actually just taken that moment to go, how is this affecting me? Massively. And I need to make some changes, and I need to put some boundaries up, and I need to change the way that I'm working, and so on, which I know we'll go on to speak of later. But I certainly feel that I'm much better now at recognizing and understanding that burnout is, it's always, like you said, it's always lurking, and being able to spot it faster now rather than be, fully overwhelmed by it. I'm much more able to go, hang on a minute, I recognize what these signs mean, which again, probably we'll talk about some of the signs.
For you, how do you recognize it? How do you know when you're approaching burnout or you are burnt out? How did you
Mm.
know in August 2020 that you'd arrived at a place of burnout?
I mean, I would say August 2020 was one of, it had gone too far. So it wasn't really about recognizing the signs. It was more like accepting that's what had happened.
Okay.
But, and I would say that, before August, maybe there was elements of my, the whole reason I made business yoga actually was inspired by this topic. So I would love to talk about that later. But I think that August burnout really helped me realize that actually I need to make the changes, and no one else is going to, no one else is going to put those boundaries in place. No one else is going to do it for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that I have become much better, even better at recognizing now, and just really prioritizing me, really understanding that my cup needs to be full up. When your cup is full up, actually you are a better human being and you're more able to help. And people aren't going like, are you okay? Whilst you're helping them, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So how do I recognize it now? So one thing for me is, I mean, these are probably obvious steps, but I think we all need those reminders sometimes.
Yeah, for real.
Um, is tiredness. Is like, if it's hard for me to get up, if I have an alarm going off and I'm like every single day, doing that reset alarm, then I'm like, okay, clearly I need a weekend where I lie in bed. It's
Mm-hmm.
not, it's like, it really amazes me that we've just come to accept that as normal, that we just go through life. Like, I don't know, have you ever had, like, I remember being in this meeting once, it was actually at Sadler's Wells, and I was like propping my head up, like I had my like head in my hand and my elbow on the table, and I was like, oh my God, I'm so knackered that I don't even feel like I can hold my head up. You
And
know what I
we're
mean? And that's
laughing,
not
but we're laughing
okay.
because it's the visual image is so ridiculous that one would get to that point, right?
Yeah.
And normalize it, kind of. Obviously we're not normalizing it, but it was a normal happening because
Yeah.
had reached that point of exhaustion and burnout.
And it makes me really sad, actually. I realized that, again, this helper thing. Like, I can remember so many times when I would feel emotional seeing that someone was working too hard. And so often it's that mirror, isn't it? It's like, well, there's the mirror. Like, why don't you also do that for yourself? But just how many people, I can think of so many beautiful human beings who are going through this or have gone through this journey, and that our society, that we have to learn to look after ourselves, because our society, that's supposed to be one that's so caring, and we have the wonderful things like the NHS, but our society doesn't set us up to really have the tools to look after our own well-being, or to really reflect on that regular basis and go, actually, no, this is what my body needs,
Mm,
rather than I need to be a good worker.
yeah, and that speaks directly to something that Selena Barker was saying to Emma Gannon in Emma's recent podcast, Control Alt Delete, and they were talking about Selena's book, Burnt Out, The Exhausted Person's Six-Step Guide to Thriving in a Fast-Paced World. And she said she wrote it to offer practical advice, because she said there are so many big, uh, heavy-duty books on burnout that are more um, academically angled, but she couldn't find anything that was practical.
Mm,
And she was talking about, from that perspective, where is, like, how does society, like you're saying, how does society help people find this more like harmonious way of living where they don't just drive themselves to burnout? And if they do arrive there, how do you actually come back to yourself? Like, how
mm,
is the way to do it? She couldn't find anything kind of really accessible. And so I mean, she's been there herself, which,
Hmm.
as you said, I'm sure many people have, many listeners have, and that's why she ended up writing the book. But specifically, what you said reminded me of something she says to Emma, and um, she says that we really are in a society which values output and it values
Mm.
production, and so that's what most of us lean toward. And actually, in order to be our most productive, we need quite a few different elements to be at play, and we need to be thriving. And when we're thriving, we're actually able to be our most productive. And so rather than just focusing on being productive and output, she was advocating, well, we need, yes, of course, we want to make progress, but we also need these elements of rest, we also need creativity, and we also need play. And having all of those elements help us thrive. And when we're thriving, we're able to be more productive. And so, just really shifting our perspective on it. And it just really spoke to me because it made me question, yeah, how much am I including all of those elements in my day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year? And if I was including them more, what would that look like in terms of my productivity? Um, where would that productivity be coming from? It would be coming from a different place, a different energy.
And then it's going to totally change what you create, absolutely, or produce.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm actually now scheduling rest and play and creativity in to my
Woohoo!
week in the same way I schedule all of these output tasks. I'm popping it in there the same way.
And I really stand by that. So I'm in a group where we like get together for one-to-ones, and they're always saying, "You're never free, Ella." And the thing is, I'm like, I don't care, because I've got 2 slots for you in a week and those get full up. But I don't want to spend my whole entire week being for others. I want to spend my week being, being full up, and that involves multiple things. And so, yeah, at first I was like apologetic, and then I was like, actually, no, I've got 2 spots. And then if you can't make those 2 spots, then we'll meet next week.
Yeah, I
Mm,
love that. That just
mm,
comes back to a lot of what we've talked about before, isn't it, on boundaries and knowing where our boundaries are so that we can feel better, live better. And
yeah.
also, like you're saying, our cup can be more full ultimately.
And I am realizing, like, I love boundaries, as you know. I'm a huge fan, but there's been a journey for me with accepting that it's it's about my cup being full up. So it doesn't have to be this mean thing, this, like, pushing people away, but actually it's going, well, this is what I need to be my best self.
Yeah,
And you're going to get my best self as a result
exactly.
of me getting what I need.
Yeah,
So,
boundaries are always about us and not actually
mm,
nothing to do with the other people.
yeah.
Like you said, you can have people who take it as this really mean decision, or they feel wounded by it or hurt, or and it's nothing about them. It's all about recognizing what you need as an individual, and acting on it. And
Mm,
when your cup is fuller, you feel happier, right? You show up as a happier person, you show up
mm,
more fully as yourself, and then people people notice that, and also it has a ripple effect on how other people feel around you and how you're
yeah.
able to show up in the things you're making, the things you're creating, the people you're around. And then when you are in service and of service to others, you're also able to actually do that from a place of fullness and from a place of energy rather than this deficit. um,
Absolutely.
yeah, I'm all for it. And again, I'm learning as well. It's a big learning for me, as we've talked about before, due to like modeled behavior, and what I've learned growing up. And also, I think partly down to some of my natural nature,
Mm,
mixture, so this is also a big learning for me.
mm,
But it feels really good to be sitting in what's true for me more and more and
mm.
more, and being unapologetic about it to the
Whoop, whoop.
closest people to me. Yeah, it feels good. Even if they don't really understand it yet, even if they're doing that thing, like you said, and making it about them. I'm learning to just be okay with that.
Yeah. And I do think in terms of relationships that it makes a huge change, because it connects back into all the things we've been talking about in previous episodes, doesn't it? It connects back into belief. Like when your cup is full up, you're able to really have that time to think about yourself, and to not be coming from that place of empty in terms of believing that you're not whole.
Yeah.
There's just so many layers in terms of, yeah, this cup, this beautiful cup. What does your cup look like, Emma?
It's a moon cup. No, I don't know.
Oh, I love it. I'm going to go with a golden. Mine is a golden cup, a golden chalice.
When we have some silver goblets in our cupboard that we've had since
Love
I
it.
was a child, and I always used to drink Ribena out of them because I wanted to feel like I was having a banquet in a castle. So
Yes.
maybe my cup is one of the
Love it.
silver goblets.
And going back to, like, we started looking at, like, how do we recognize when we're burnout, and how do we fill up our cup? It'd be really lovely to, maybe we can just start to share some of our signs. These are the signs that I spot, and these are the things that I do to fill up my chalice or my silver goblet.
So personally for me, so I've only been burnt out once, I would say. I've definitely suffered from exhaustion, but the episode of burnout I had was epic, and I was, it was so epic that I never want to experience that again. It's just somewhere I never want to go back to. Um, it took me quite a while to recognize the signs because I'd never had burnout before, and because I I'm used to functioning from a really overtired space or pushing myself to like levels of
Mm,
exhaustion. So I was just like, oh, I'm really exhausted. I'm really tired. I really need to have a rest. I really need to stop. Not realizing I was actually burnt out. And um, I was contracted to do lots of work at the time, and I was, like, well, I can't stop because I have all of this work that's booked in, and I can't just not turn up or not do it. And so I couldn't see in my mind, I couldn't see where there was an option for me to stop and rest. And then I was actually listening to a podcast, and I don't remember which it was. And I remember the host describing burnout, and I was cooking and I was listening. As I heard the host describe, I was like, "Oh my gosh, everything they've just said is exactly how I feel right now." And it was huge because I just hadn't even for a minute imagined that that's the space I was in. Um, so things like simple activities and tasks taking far longer than they usually would. So, simple things for me like hanging laundry, which I could normally just, you know, get done in like 5-10 minutes, depending on how big the load was taking me half an hour to an hour. And I was having to sit down and hang the laundry.
mm,
And yeah, just being persistently tired no matter how much sleep I was getting. Um, Not finding joy in anything I was doing. Um,
mm,
Really just kind of doing and feeling very treadmillish and not feeling excited about any of it. Not wanting to spend time with any of my friends or
mm,
family. I just had like complete disinterest in spending time with people because to me that equaled more energy output that I just really didn't have at the time.
mm,
Um, and then I remember my brain just constantly felt full and fuzzy all the time, and I felt so overwhelmed. Um, and I felt really hypersensitive to noise and sound.
mm.
Um, and so actually, I remember just talking to my friend about it, and she has a two-bed house, and she lives solo, and she invited me to stay.
Oh, that's
And
so nice.
yeah, she's incredible. She said, just come and stay. I'm going to be at work all day, so you don't have to have noise from anyone or anything. You on your own, you can do whatever you like all day.
Mm,
She has a garden, so she was like, you can go outside, you can, be in nature. And really doing that, making that choice to do that, when at the time I felt like, oh, maybe this isn't a choice that's available to me to go and stay. at her house because I had all this stuff on and I had all these family responsibilities. And eventually I just made the choice to do it. And
Yes,
yeah, and
so happy to hear.
me too. Honestly, I think if I hadn't, I don't think it would have been such a big turning point for me in so many ways.
Mm,
Um, God knows what would have happened to me if I hadn't made that choice. But yeah, then I actually only stayed for a week.
mm.
And I say only because I needed to stay longer, but I
Yeah, I can
felt like,
remember that. I can remember you coming home and being like, no, go
yeah.
back.
But I actually wasn't able to. But what that week did give me incredibly was mornings to wake up when my body was ready to wake up. I
Mm,
go downstairs, make a coffee or make a hot tea. I took my journal, and for the first part of every day, I would just write. That's all I would do
yum,
for as long as I needed. And I remember
yum,
pretty much every morning I was writing for about 3 hours. And I would go outside and I would eat outside and I would just nourish myself and be slow and figure out where I was at through journaling and rest. And what came
mm.
out of it was so many reflections on what I no longer wanted in my life, what wasn't serving me, what I wasn't enjoying anymore, what was sucking my energy in a negative way. And I made choices to take those things out of my life or phase them out.
Whoop, whoop.
Yeah, and then to reflect on what I wanted in my life and look at how I could bring those things in over time.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think I wouldn't have been able to do any of that if I didn't have the physical space
What a
and,
gift.
yeah, the physical
Yeah.
space to do it.
I would love to just add one more way I spot
Mm,
burnout for our listeners, and then it'd be really nice to start to talk about the how we put those steps in place and what we've changed.
mm,
So one more for me is, and this is really important for me, like when I see this happening, I'm like, okay, so it might be that I'm, for example, actually lying in my bed, not resting because I'm thinking about the fact that I should be doing something and I'm really stressed and scared about it and I don't know how to do it. And I've really recognized, like, when I'm in burnout, the smallest task can just feel like this huge mountain,
yeah.
and it might just be like an email, but it's like turns into this thing, and then yeah, I'm like unable to move, but unable to rest, and it's like I'm in
Stuck
fight
in
or flight
this.
mode, lying still. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? And that
yeah.
for me is when I'm like, okay, no, this is not okay, and my body needs I need to come back out of this, and I need to come back out into a state of rest and
Mm,
thriving. Like you said, it's the opposite of thriving, isn't it? When
yeah,
you're not able to take action,
yes,
you're not able to rest. It's like your body is just in full shutdown mode.
yeah.
Mm.
Horrible.
So, on that lovely note, what can we do? How can we make those changes? How are we safeguarding ourselves from burnout?
So, I mean, first and foremost, take a look at what you're doing day to day, week to week, and ask yourself how much rest there is in there, how much play there is in there, how much creativity. And I think that's a really good starting point just to see where your scale tips. And then to go, okay, I've got tons of that. I've got maybe 80% of productive working and, only 20% of the rest. How can I start to dedicate more of my time to these other elements and less to this side of things? I think that's like a really good first initial kind of scan to do to give yourself an honest idea of where you're at in your life.
I have this new little mantra, which I flip in love, which is so much time, so little to do.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I
And I
saw that. I
swear
love
it's
it.
just changed my life. Like thinking like that instead of, it's like I was really the programming of, I'm in overwhelm, I have loads to do, I need to, I should be. All of those words, I'm finding when I say that to myself, it's like the stuff gets done that needs to get done. And the rest of it, you know, we're going to have a to-do list until we die.
Yeah.
Sadly, it's true. So
Yeah.
understanding that it's not about, your day isn't about getting to the end of your to-do list, but about, like John Lennon says, the bits in between the to-do list, and really making the most of that. As you know, I work with choices, and so I think choices is a really good way to look at that balance, that kind of idea of our life being a whole and not putting all of our focus into one area. And so I find that really helps me to kind of focus and use meditation every morning to check in with what would I love to create and what is it that I am focusing on each day. And that helps me to go, you know, part of it is being in nature. Part of it's actually singing. Would you believe it? I have a choice in singing. You probably would.
Yeah, I do completely. Yes.
Yeah. You know, part of it is about our physical health. There's so many elements. And so recognizing that our life isn't about just one kind of area. But I would love to speak a little bit about business yoga and kind of why I created that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Which really was from one of these moments of burnout, and also from observing it in family members, particularly my sister who works in finance in London. And I just thought, this world doesn't work. You know, we need to put well-being at the heart of the workplace, and we need to see change. We need to be helping people to live their lives and not be a lemming that's just going to work and doing that is right, isn't it? I haven't said lemming for a long time now.
That is right. Yeah.
You know, that I was seeing a lot of those kind of signs of, like, when you finally are free from work, then you go crazy because
Yeah.
it's like we're not having the balance in your life. And
Yeah.
so business yoga was really about offering things like breath work, meditation, mindfulness, and educating people around, offering talks around things like burnout and things like, how do you look after your body? How do you spot the signs, and what kind of tools do you put in place so that you're supporting yourself? Um, and that has actually really, you know, so I kind of started that journey. When did I start, Amma? 3 years ago?
Yeah, I would say
Yeah.
3 years.
And it's been an education for me as well. And so now I do take regular breaks, and I do warm up before I sit down, and I do have little timers to go, okay, that's enough.
Yeah,
You know,
me
it's so
too.
easy to lose our, like, just
To get
to
lost
think
in
that
the
we are a
doing,
body.
isn't it?
Say that again.
It's really easy to get lost in the stream of
Mm,
doing
yeah,
if you don't set those little timers for yourself. And that's something I never
absolutely.
used to do. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, how was I not doing this before? Because, you know, you go and go and go, and you can just go sometimes for hours and not
Mm.
realize. And it doesn't necessarily make you more productive.
And it doesn't even make you like a night. Like, I can remember a friend of mine being really stressed because she had a deadline and she was in the house, and she was so, like, cranky. You know, like, it doesn't make us a nice person. And
Yeah.
obviously when we have stuff to do, we have stuff to do, and it can be really stressful. But what I'm realizing for myself anyway is I'm actually better at working when I take the breaks,
Yeah.
and it takes the time it takes to get done. You know, it's not about becoming a machine and not going for a wee for
Yeah.
another hour.
Yes. And I'm laughing because I've done that. I'm laughing
Yeah,
because I'm like guilty. Like I've done that.
yeah.
And
And I'm
it's
sure me as well. I'm sure many of our listeners, let us know if you are guilty of
you.
denying yourself the gift of having a wee over getting a deadline done.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't make you a joyful person to be around. And
Mm,
you know, you don't feel joyful, or you don't feel as um, you know, as fully I think you don't feel as complete. I don't anyway. I think when I'm really productivity heavy with this idea, this metric of productiveness, you know, that
mm,
we have in society is how much output is coming out. I think I don't feel as complete. And I think recently, with giving myself, or using the timer approach, and then also giving myself cut-offs, like quite strict cut-offs, and then also having some days where, you know, I decide I'm not going to work today. This is a day where
mm,
I'm not doing any work. It doesn't matter. I mean, unless it's like an £1 million job, then, I'll consider it. But, these days are days I'm not going to work.
Yeah, and
I'm
making those sacred.
making them sacred. These after 7:30, I'm not going to reply to work emails. I'm not available for that. And that reply will happen tomorrow or it will happen the next day. It's okay. And also in doing so, the person on the other end of that email will start to recognize, oh, she never replies to work emails after this time. And then they will hopefully start to also honor that or in you, or just know that they're not going to get a response and not expect a response because we're not always on. I think there's really an unspoken expectation that we are always going to be on because people can contact each other through so many different methods now, all these apps, WhatsApp, Telegram, Instagram, Snapchat, YouTube, emails, phone call. And I think a really big part of being able to safeguard ourselves against burnout is being able to clearly decide when we're going to be on and when we're going to be off, and then creating these little sacred moments and pockets of time for ourselves
Love
and
that.
choosing how we fill them, hopefully in ways that make us feel more full and happy.
And I wonder how we define what off is as well, based on what you just said. Like, it's so easy with all of those modes of contact for off to actually be like, oh yeah, I've got to call like 5 friends today. You know what I mean? And actually that I do think it's really important that we have a day of the week that we just don't do phones, that we just be off. And at the same time, maybe it's also without rules, because again, I'm not into shoulds and shouldn'ts and so on. But what does off really look like for you? Thank you for listening. You can connect to us and our guests via the links in each episode's show notes. Before you go, we invite you to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of the goodness to come. And if you enjoyed today, perhaps tell a friend to tell a friend. We are always grateful for you, our listeners, for our fabulous guests, and to everyone who has contributed to and been a part of our journey here.
Our music is by Tomo Carter. Everything else is brought to you by us, the PowerUp Power Team.
I'm Mesma.
I am AmaRouge. And we are PowerUp Podcast.